Secretary Granholm, welcome to New York City. We're here to talk about electric vehicles, a hot topic in Washington and across the country. So let's start with range anxiety, a real concern for drivers who are new to this technology. How do we solve this problem? Is it building vehicles with more than 300 miles of range, or is it putting charging stations in every town and on every highway?
It's both, actually. So the range anxiety issue, and I totally get this. I mean, who wants to buy a car if you can't fill it up in whatever way, right? So that's why the Biden administration has put $7.5 billion into building out these charging stations in places where the private sector is not already going. We've got about 170,000 charging stations across America right now. They're adding about 900 per week. The goal is, with the money that has come from the president's agenda, to get to we think we're going to get to 500,000 by 2026 and more after that. I think it's important for people to know, though, that if they have a garage, they have a charging station. Just plug it in at home. And I think a lot of times people who are considering buying EVs aren't aware that that is an option.
We're gonna talk about home charging in a minute, but according to J.D. Power, this is a recent survey, skepticism about public charging availability is the primary reason consumers reject EVs. You personally experienced some charging difficulties this summer on your EV roadshow. The Department of Transportation recently said it was going to grant $149 million to repair or replace non-operational EV chargers. So what is the department doing to hold private charging companies accountable for these offline and broken chargers?
Yeah, first of all, that funding goes to states to make sure they identify which chargers are out and put in ones that work. And all the funding from the federal government has to go to 97% effectiveness of these chargers. We do not want to see, having spent all the money to install a charger, and the frustration of EV owners who might go to a charger and it not be working. Now, let me just say this. We are trying to fill in all of these gaps. And we know that right now there aren't enough chargers in the United States. And the whole goal of the president was to add 500,000 charging just from the public money in places where we don't already have them. And it also means replacing those chargers that don't work. But if you are able to park along a street and pull down a charger from a lamppost and plug it in if you don't have other options, if you're able to just go to a Walmart and plug in and go shopping and come out and have it be, you can imagine that the accessibility of chargers will be more abundant than if you drive a gas-powered vehicle and have to find a gas station. If you can charge in convenient places at a library, at a park, you will see, I think, this range anxiety issue drop. But I understand that it's there right now, and that's why we're working very fast to get these chargers out right now.
And what type of chargers are we talking about? Are they level 2? Are they level 3?
The big chargers, of course, along the freeway, we want them to be high-speed chargers, and we want people to know that because of the federal funding, they will be every 50 miles, not more than 1 mile off of the freeway or a transportation corridor. We are very focused on fast charging so that people feel comfortable. We're also, I must say, kudos to those entities in the private sector who are oil and gas industry who are actually putting electric vehicle charging stations at the gas stations now, because they see that as an opportunity, especially if they got a snack store. They make a lot of money, the gas station owners, through the snack store. And if you're charging, you might spend a little bit of time in the snack store while it's charging to be able to get whatever, Kit Kats you need.
So the White House also said it would provide a tax credit to help reduce the cost of home chargers.
Yeah.
So what is the White House doing to help Americans who want an EV but don't own their own home or live in urban areas like New York City?
Right. So first of all, this is why the funding for charging in places along the street is very important. The funding for putting charging near or at multifamily dwellings, apartments, et cetera, is very important. And then, of course, the funding to put charging where people normally spend a little bit of time. So whether it's, at rest stops or stores or parks or, anything like that, we want charging to be more accessible than what it would be if you had to go fill up your tank. And let's just say, if you have to fill up your tank, you're not filling that up at home. And if you can fill up your car at home, that's a convenience that we want people to enjoy.
So I talk to a lot of consumers and people are skeptical about EVs. They're worried that they have to go to a public charging station and it's going to take 4 to 6 hours to get maybe 100 miles of range, right?
If they don't have a high-speed charger, it's going to take more time. And that's why we want to get more of these high-speed chargers out across the country. I'll say that too. It's important, if you buy an electric vehicle, you get an app and you are connected to the charging network so that you can see where are charging stations available, where are they online and working. That is an important feature of ease and accessibility and taking down that worry.
So which pockets of the country need these chargers most? Obviously not California.
Right. Well, California's got a plan. In fact, all 50 states have a plan for installing EV chargers based upon the president's funding. But the plan is to fill up the gaps. So there's a lot of states where there isn't a lot of EVs at all. And so those states have a plan too, and their plan has been approved and they've gotten their funding to be able to build out these EV chargers. You know, we're particularly concerned about those travel corridors, and we're particularly concerned about rural areas where there are not a lot of EVs, and urban areas where people can't afford an EV or where there just isn't a big uptake. Where there's a lot of apartment buildings, as you noted, a lot of street parking. So those gaps are the gaps that this funding from the National Electric Vehicle Initiative is attempting to fill. And hope, people are going to really start seeing this year in particular these EV charging stations pop up in places that they have not been before.
And from these charging stations are going to be from companies like EVgo, ChargePoint, Electrify America.
Yeah, every state is going to have to figure out who is going to be their provider of charging. The money went to the states. The states have the plan. They've started to put out solicitations now for who's going to actually be building those charging stations and installing them.
Okay, so President Biden has said that he'd like electric vehicles to make up at least 50% of new vehicle sales by 2030. Last year, EVs accounted for 7% of the U.S. market. How is the administration going to accomplish this goal in 6 years?
Well, I mean, last year the sales were 1.4 million, which was
that was a record for EVs.
Right, it was a record, and it was 50% more than the year before. Last year I think was really sort of the EV revolution launched across America. This year, you're going to see it spread all across. I mean, honestly, I think it's not about what the president says. It's about what people who buy an EV say. The satisfaction rate of EV owners is through the roof, like 95%. People who've driven an EV and won't go back because it's so much better. It's so much cheaper to operate. I mean, if you fill up your average gas tank today, average car, it's about $49. If you charge and go that same distance, it's about $15. I mean, that's if you fill up every week, that is a huge savings for your average citizen. So just on the savings of operating an EV alone, now they've become more affordable, and we can talk about that. They're not fully affordable yet, I fully recognize, but the price is coming down significantly. And to drive them themselves, I mean, it's a huge piece of technology on wheels, and they're fun to drive. So I think that as people decide to replace their vehicles, EVs will become something that more people will look at once they've heard their neighbors say, you know what, this is really great.
We're going to talk about prices, but you have driven many EVs. Longtime EV owner. So when people stop you and say, what's your experience like in the Bolt or the Mach-E, what do you tell them?
Oh, I tell them I love it. I love it. My Chevy Bolt, a great car. I just love this car. And it was so cheap to operate. Now, I also lease solar panels. And so I was just driving my Chevy Bolt on sunshine. But that was because I had a garage and I could do that. Not everybody can do that. I totally understand that. But even going to a charging station and filling up, even with a fast charger, is so much cheaper than operating. And the beauty about, I love this personally, that these vehicles are so quiet. Even with a Chevy Bolt, which was, not a luxury vehicle, it's your basic vehicle, the quietness of it makes it feel sort of like a luxury vehicle, like you'd be inside of a Cadillac or something like that, because it was so quiet.
And have you experienced any of these charging anxieties that many Americans have?
Oh, sure. I have. I have. And not necessarily in my personal vehicles. We did a road trip earlier this year. We'll be taking electric vehicles on this road trip. We had difficulty accessing charging in the South where there wasn't enough charging stations. That goes to the point of us really accelerating the build out of these charging stations, especially in places where they are not. But for me, my cars, because I do have a garage, I can just plug in the garage. I don't even have a charging station. A lot of people don't realize if you have a plug in your garage, you can just charge up your car there, and that makes it just super convenient. I never have to go to a gas station.
You're right. Okay, so in the Inflation Reduction Act, that drastically reduced the number of EVs and plug-in hybrids that were eligible for the federal tax credit. As of right now, there are just 3 models that qualify for the full $7,500 tax credit. And the average price paid for a new EV last year was nearly $51,000. So how can middle and low-income Americans afford an EV when they're already so expensive and so few meet the revised federal tax credit requirements?
Couple of points on this. One is, so the federal tax credit is $7,500. The reason why the number reduced, the types of models available reduced, is because we also want these vehicles to be made in America. And so there's a Made in America provision. Tells you that there's a great opportunity to bring back manufacturing to this country so that people can qualify for a fully American-made vehicle. And that is actually what's happening. So we see now all of the build-out of these EV companies, of battery companies for the EV. It is so exciting, the manufacturing revolution that has been triggered by the incentives associated with it. So right now, yes, there are fewer models because they're not fully being built, but there will be many more EV models available this year, next year. So that's number one. Number two, you can get an EV tax credit for a used electric vehicle as well, which is $4,000 off of the top. The dealers have all registered now to take the tax credit at the dealership, which is very, very important. You can lease an electric vehicle, and in that you don't need to have it all made in America. It's a question about whether that's a loophole or not, but that's the fact is that if you lease, you can still qualify. And there so many states have tax credits on top of the federal tax credit. So if you bought a car in Maine, for example, you'd have the $7,500 tax credit, and you would have another $7,500, so $15,000. I mean, last year the low-end Bolt was up less than $30,000. If you have $15,000 off from state and federal tax credits, you're now financing a $15,000 car. That is totally affordable. So there are options, and many of these tax credits are all income dependent too. So these are geared toward lower end, middle and lower end folks.
Do you know why the administration didn't push off the date for all these requirements to go into effect? Why not wait until 2026 or 2027 so more automakers could qualify?
Yeah, I think the law was written in a way that there wasn't that option. And that law, the Inflation Reduction Act, was negotiated heavily. But it also forces investment in the United States. And, as a result of forcing investment in the United States, there's a whole other side benefit, which is jobs all across the country. 345 companies have announced they are building batteries, expanding batteries and electric vehicle factories in the United States. That's a significant benefit.
So one interesting trend that has developed recently in the auto industry is that everyone wants a hybrid. You cannot find a hybrid vehicle on lots now. So do you think we could give hybrids tax credits too to get even more people to buy them? So
plug-in hybrids are eligible for the tax credit, but hybrids without the plug-in are not. And it's a good question about whether there should be credit extended. The whole point is to get more efficient, reduce dependency on fossil fuels and on oil and on expensive gas. And so electrification in general of your vehicle is a great goal that the administration has, as well as I hope that a lot of people have.
So Ford and GM have both pulled back on their EV targets. Production of the Silverado EV, for example, was moved to late 2025. Ford said it was scaling back plans for an EV battery plant in Michigan. You're the former governor of the state. Also, Ford has said that demand for its F-150 Lightning truck is slowing. What's your reaction to all of these announcements?
Well, I mean, first of all, they may have overprojected where things were going to be, but this movement toward electrification, I think, is inexorable. It is happening. I mean, if you just look at the 50% increase year over year last year in EV uptake. So they will tell you, the automaker CEOs will tell you they're not pulling back or reversing trend in their investments. They may be slowing a little bit, but honestly, I think it's a snowball that's going downhill that is only going to accelerate.
And, again, you're a 2-term governor of Michigan. You're well aware that Americans love large SUVs, large trucks, and 8-cylinder engines. So how can you convince a large percentage of Americans who live in middle America to go electric?
Well, I mean, the Ford F-150 is a great example of a big car that has gone electric and is very exciting. So, but people have to make their own decision. I get it. Nobody's going to force anybody to make these decisions. I honestly think that as the price of the electric vehicle comes down, and it has dropped 23% year over year, 23% reduction, which means that they're on par now, a new EV and a new gas-powered vehicle. And the price of operating the car and not having to go to the gas station and being able to fill it up for much less and more conveniently, honestly, I think it's going to sell itself. And I think you'll see, I mean, this is why, Tesla, for example, their uptake has been amazing. They've accounted for a huge percentage of the increase in electric vehicle sales. Mm-hmm. It's because they've offered a lower, not a low, but a lower cost model, an more entry-level model, and people just love driving the car. You're going to see this throughout all of these models. So I think, I get it. People love their cars. You're a car gal, I know. and I think that they'll love their EVs too. They have been.
Do you think this is going to be a topic going electric between President Biden and whoever the Republican nominee is? Do you think this is going to be a common topic on the campaign trail, talking about electric vehicles and this push?
I mean, it could be, but here's the interesting part is that all of those factories that I was talking about regarding building electric vehicles and electric vehicle batteries, 60% of them are going into red states. So, people in red states love their EVs too and are working at these factories. So I think, again, I just think that over time, the political nonsense about it will die down and people's experience will speak much more loudly. I think it's important, for those who care about global warming, climate change, and doing their part, EVs are a solution for them. For those who care about cost, EVs are a solution for them. For those who care about power, EVs are a solution for them. I mean, people just have to get used to it and understand it. And I think, you'll see this uptake continue to snowball.
This is great. What are we missing about electric vehicles? What do you want to tell me?
People need to understand that the whole supply chain for building these electric vehicles is coming back to the United States. And there's a lot of talk, I know, in the political space about EVs, batteries being made in China, et cetera. That's the whole point of these tax credits, is to incentivize bringing back that full supply chain in the United States. Mm-hmm. And so whereas China has had domination over batteries, and that's true, whether it's a gas-powered vehicle or electric vehicle, they've had domination. We are now bringing this back. And so the Department of Energy is funding companies to fill in the gaps in the supply chain to build that full system here. And that means jobs. People are going to have jobs doing responsible extraction of minerals. They're going to have jobs processing those critical minerals. They're going to have jobs building the batteries and the anode, the cathode, the separator material. All of those are businesses that go into a battery. And then they're going to have jobs assembling the battery into the vehicle. It's really a huge manufacturing and jobs win for the country to be able to build this ecosystem in this industry here. And that, to me, is a really very important benefit of the president's agenda.